In the long struggle against apartheid, South Africa produced many leaders, activists, thinkers, and soldiers. Among them was Joe Modise, a man who dedicated his life to the armed struggle as commander of Umkhonto weSizwe, the armed wing of the African National Congress, and later as the first Minister of Defense in a democratic South Africa. Modise's political career spanned decades of secrecy, sacrifice, and eventual power. This is the story of Joe Modise, the freedom fighter turned statesman. Joe Modise was born in 1929, Johannesburg, and grew up in the township of Alexandra. His early life was shaped by the hardships of segregation and the injustices that defined black life in urban South Africa. As a young man, he joined the ANC Youth League in the 1940s, inspired by leaders like Walter Sisulu, Oliver Tambo, Nelson Mandela. Unlike many who channeled their activism through protest, Modise gravitated towards direct action and defense, traits that would define his political career.
There are many people who feel that the reaction of the government to our stay at home, ordering a general mobilization, arming the white community, arresting 10,000s of Africans, the show of force throughout the country, notwithstanding our clear declaration that this campaign is being run on peaceful and non-violent lines, close the chapter as far as our methods of political struggle are concerned. There are many people who feel that it is useless and futile for us to continue talking peace and non-violence against a government whose reply is only savage attacks on an unarmed and defenseless people. And I think the time has come for us to consider, in the light of our experiences in this stay at home, whether the methods which we have applied so far are adequate.
The year 1960 was a turning point. After the Sharpeville massacre, when police opened fire on unarmed protesters, killing 69, the apartheid state banned the ANC and the Pan-Africanist Congress. It became clear to many in the movement that peaceful protest alone could not defeat apartheid. The ANC leadership decided to form an armed wing, Umkhonto weSizwe, or MK, meaning the Spear of the Nation. Joe Modise was chosen as its first commander. His task was daunting, building a guerrilla army out of exiled activists and young recruits, train them abroad, and sustain an underground military presence inside South Africa, all while facing one of the most powerful security states on the continent. Under Modise's leadership, MK established training camps in friendly African countries such as Tanzania, Zambia, and later Angola. The Soviet Union, East Germany, and other socialist allies provided military training and weapons. Modise became a central figure in coordinating this vast network, liaising with ANC leaders in exile, recruiting new fighters, and maintaining discipline in the camps. He was respected as a soldier, but his leadership was not without criticism. Some accused MK of lacking effectiveness inside South Africa, where infiltration was dangerous and sabotage operations often thwarted by the apartheid state. Others raised concerns about conditions in the camps. Still, Modise held command for 3 decades, becoming the face of the ANC's armed struggle. Through the 1970s and 80s, Modise oversaw MK's expansion. Young people fleeing South Africa after the Soweto uprising of 1976 swelled MK's ranks. They were trained in Angola, Mozambique, and the Soviet bloc. MK carried out sabotage missions, landmine attacks, urban operations, while also building alliances with liberation movements across southern Africa. Modise often operated behind the scenes, but his influence was immense. By the 1980s, MK had become a symbol of resistance, though the ANC's armed campaign never defeated the apartheid military outright. It forced Pretoria to confront the reality that apartheid could not be sustained without permanent war.
Landmines were used in areas that were extensively patrolled by the South African Defence Force and also by the area protection units known by the term commandos. Most of those operations, man-laying operations, were in the border areas, the areas that were patrolled very, very effectively. I think it is common knowledge to the Commission here that part of the fence was electrified, and in most instances it was on the lethal mode, and there were gaps, and where they didn't have the fence, that's where most of the patrolling took place. The idea was to try and impede, reduce the intensity of these patrols. The African National Congress realized that after the few incidents where civilians were caught, the president called us in and asked us to put a stop to this method of operation. I gave the instructions to all our forces to stop using the landmine.
By the late 1980s, apartheid was crumbling under international pressure, internal unrest, and economic crisis. In 1990, Nelson Mandela was released, the ANC was unbanned, and the armed struggle gave way to negotiations. Joe Modise now faced a new task, transforming the guerrilla movement into a legitimate national defense force. He participated in delicate talks to integrate MK fighters with the apartheid army, the South African Defence Force, into what would become the South African National Defence Force, or SANDF. This was no small achievement, bringing together former enemies with deep mistrust and different cultures, requiring extraordinary political skill. In 1994, with the advent of democracy, Joe Modise was appointed South Africa's first black Minister of Defence under President Nelson Mandela. It was a historic moment. The man once hunted as a terrorist was now in charge of the country's military. As minister, Modise oversaw the integration of thousands of MK fighters into the SANDF, while also ensuring stability among the former apartheid troops. He emphasized professionalism, discipline, and the creation of a non-racial military. But his tenure was not without controversy. The late 1990s saw the multi-billion rand arms deal, in which allegations of corruption swelled. Though Modise was implicated in benefiting from contracts, no charges were ever proven. To his critics, these scandals clouded his legacy. To his supporters, he remained the man who brought dignity to MK fighters and ensured a peaceful military transition.
If the executive were so confident of the integrity of the arms deals, they would have opened their arms wide to any investigation. But they did the opposite. They went to extraordinary lengths to sabotage the investigation and sabotage those who oversaw that investigation.
But Wood's testimony has provided no evidence of corruption. He has offered only circumstantial evidence and deductive reasoning, and was admonished by Judge Willie Seriti for not providing proof to substantiate his evidence.
I'm not quite sure what is the evidential value of that article from Mail and Guardian. I'm really not sure, unless if it's all the journalist who wrote this report comes in and testifies.
Woods has alleged that former Defence Minister Joe Modise and other government officials scored cash handouts and other awards for ensuring that certain arms companies secured lucrative contracts. but he hasn't been able to provide any evidence of these claims besides newspaper reports.
Joe Modise retired from government in 1999 after 5 years as defense minister. He lived quietly until his death in 2001. His funeral was attended by former comrades, international allies, and the new military establishment he helped create. Nelson Mandela described him as a soldier of rare courage and a patriot who sacrificed so much for his people. Joe Modise's legacy is complex. He was the commander who kept the armed struggle alive through decades of exile, ensuring the ANC remained a fighting force. He was also a politician who managed one of the most delicate transitions in South African history: the integration of former enemies into a single national army. Yet, controversy followed him. Allegations of corruption in the arms deal tarnished his reputation, and critics argue MK under his leadership was often ineffective inside South Africa. Still, his contribution cannot be denied. Without Modise, the armed struggle would have lacked continuity, and the democratic transition may have been far more violent. Joe Modise's life is the story of South Africa's armed struggle, sacrifice, exile, endurance, and finally transformation. From guerrilla commander to defense minister, his political career spanned the darkest days of apartheid to the dawn of democracy. He remains a figure of both inspiration and controversy, a reminder that liberation is never simple, and that the path from soldier to statesman is marked by both triumph and trial.